Hello everyone, welcome to Celebrity Squad. Today we're talking about the most expensive buys in Pawn Star history. But before we get to the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also leave a comment down below for a chance to win our monthly shout out. Let's get to the video. The treasures and finds that come in front of the shop runners in the History Channel's wildly successful series Pawn Stars have only grown in value as the show has elevated their shop's stature. With more and more collectors learning about the dealings of Rick, Richard, Chumley, and Corey, the show's promise that you never know what will walk through the door has only become more true. Over the course of more than 500 episodes, world-famous gold and silver pawn shop co-owner Rick Harrison has made some eye-popping buys. Rick used the store's considerable capital and clout, not to mention his seemingly endless well of experts, to grab a hold of history via large stacks of cash. Harrison's well-trained eye knows an opportunity to make money when he sees it, even if that means putting huge sums of money on the line. With that in mind, we've compiled some of the series' biggest buys. Here's a look at the most expensive items the Pawn Stars actually purchased on the show. $250,000 for Maurice Sendak sketches. In the same season as the George Washington find, Rick came across something he couldn't help but have. A collector offered him the original sketches that became Maurice Sendak's children's book classic, Where the Wild Things Are. Rick was clearly awed by the drawings when he saw them in person. "It was the greatest book ever written," Rick told the dealer. "When I was a kid, I was fascinated by the pictures. It was so different from any other children's book." Because Sendak never sold prints of his work for Where the Wild Things Are, the sketches were one of a kind. After consulting with an art expert who told him he could expect to net $310,000 for the sketches, Rick talked the owner into selling the lot for $250,000. This is still the most expensive item ever purchased in Pawn Stars history. $111,000 for 3,000 ounces of silver. The second largest purchase in Pawn Stars history was a lot easier for the shop to verify the value of. When a customer rolled into the shop with a dolly loaded down with 3,000 ounces of silver in bars and coinage, the Harrisons knew they had a deal on their hands. Because of the significant amount of money changing hands and the ease with which a scammer could fake a silver bar with a different metal at its core, Rick drilled into the center of the bars to determine they were purely made of the precious metal. "Testing silver is a little work, but it's not rocket science," Rick said, before explaining how to test silver with nitric acid. If the silver he extracted for testing turned a milky white color when exposed to the acid, it was pure. After verifying that it was real, he purchased it for a roughly market rate at a cost of $111,000. $95,000 for a 1932 Lincoln Roadster. The Harrisons had to spend big to get a luxury Lincoln Roadster built in the middle of the Great Depression. A beautifully maintained mint and cream-colored roadster with a massive V12 engine hiding under its gigantic hood was too good to let leave the shop. The 1932 Roadster was an attempt by Lincoln's parent company, Ford, to lure drivers away from their competitors at Cadillac. It was priced to move at $4,000 in 1932, roughly $70,000 in today's money. Rick and the old man went above and beyond that price point to make sure that they walked away from the deal with a car. For the decadent 150 horsepower classic car from 1932, they offered a cash buy of nearly $100,000. They didn't have to wait long to get their money back, however. The owner turned right around and used the $95,000 he made in the deal to buy gold from the pawn shop. $90,000 for Mary Ford's 1961 Gibson SG Les Paul guitar. Gibson's Les Paul signature guitars can cost a pretty penny as is. But when the well-crafted guitars are connected to the legendary songwriter whose name is on the instrument, that's worth quite a bit more. That explains why the Harrisons felt they should shell out $90,000 for a 1961 Les Paul guitar that belonged to Paul's wife, Mary. All pawn shops trade in guitars at some point, but the show's outsized stature as a purchaser of rare antiques made it a fitting stop for the owner of this particular instrument. For the uninitiated, Les Paul and Mary Ford were a wildly successful singing duo in the 1950s, with 28 hit records to their name. They hosted popular radio and television variety shows together throughout the decade. That Mary herself had played this guitar on tracks like the #1 hit, How High the Moon, made its value skyrocket. They paid $90,000 for the chance to own a piece of musical history so closely tied to the godfather of rock and roll guitars. $85,000 for 1941 Gibson SG 200 guitar. Another Gibson walked into the pawn shop once with a much more widely known star attached. Stephen Stills of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and sometimes Young, owned this 1941 model. The guitar was visibly beautiful, incredibly well maintained, and boasted the lovely sound of mid-century Gibsons. But it was a bill of sale signed by Stills himself that made the guitar worthwhile. Rick Harrison ultimately purchased the guitar for a solid $85,000, getting his hands on a piece of classic rock history that was bound to find a deep-pocketed buyer. After all, we all heard Ohio umpteen times in our lives, and somebody out there has to love it enough to drop 6 figures and own a guitar that was so close to the process. Are there any rich Buffalo Springfield fans in the house? Rick has a deal you won't want to pass up, and he'll be sure to sell it to you for what it's worth. $80,000 for a 1922 high-relief dollar. It's not just cars and guitars that fetch top dollar. Occasionally, the shop will shell out for actual dollars. Such was the case with this rare dollar coin from 1922 that the shop paid $80,000 to own. It's known in collector circles as one of the rarest American coins ever made, and its owner lucked into it in a poker game. While he knew he had an expensive coin in his hands, he had no idea how much it was worth. The coin in question is rare because of the sharp relief of its design. While the deep grooves make a more beautiful coin, they wore down the dies that produced the coins. Almost all of the high-relief versions of the dollar coin were melted down shortly after they were stamped. The owner believed that the coin, which is one of around 12 in existence, was worth $20,000. Rick's coinage expert revealed that the coin was worth as much as 5 times that, saying it could easily sell for $100,000. Rick made an offer of $80,000 for the coin, and the poker player happily took it. $60,000 for JFK's cigar box. When a man walked into the gold and silver pawn shop with a piece of presidential history described as a once-in-a-lifetime item, Rick just had to have it. The item was a cigar box that once sat on President John Kennedy's desk in the Oval Office. It even included some unsmoked cigars. Considering another of JFK's cigar boxes sold for over $500,000 back in the 90s, Rick was onto a winner when he haggled this one off the gentleman for $60,000. Thanks for watching our video. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe, and check out these videos. We think you'll love them.